I just realized I was letting bitterness, the poison of bitterness, cycle through my soul. So I began to realize, under the urging of some good brothers, that I had a choice. You can go through a tough situation. You can even be mistreated. You can sustain blows. You can be in the midst of terrible, bloody, violent, terrible situations that you might have to deal with in life. You have a choice as to whether you surrender your heart to it.
Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. Men's Alliance is a growing movement of tribes across the nation that meet weekly for rugged outdoor workouts and a real-world devotion around a fire. If you want to be a part of what we're doing, join us at men'salliancetribe.com, where you can find a tribe near you or come to one of our Start the Fire weekends. So check us out at men'salliancetribe.com. Now stay tuned for this great podcast. Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. I'm Dave Mills Goose, and back with us today for his second time on the Men's Alliance podcast, we've got Stephen Mansfield. Stephen, thanks for being here.
And it's great to be back with you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so when you were on the show last year, we were audio only. So we bought cameras, and I apologize. That means now you got to look at my ugly mug while we're talking. We might want to go back to audio. We'll let you decide after
And
this.
I got to tell you, it means I got to get up and get showered and shave and look decent at 9 o'clock in the morning, which for me, a guy who works in his gym clothes all day is a stretch. No, I know. Fine. Your set looks great, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. Shadow and I, we were bummed when we had to start fixing, combing our hair for these things. There's certain, comfortability in audio, but man, I've got an ambitious, and I don't know if we're going to tackle it, but I've got an ambitious set of topics to tee you up to discuss with you today. And I don't know if we'll get to all three, but it was like, man, I couldn't pick what I wanted to talk with you about today. So I thought, well, heck with it. Let's just try to hit all three. But for those of you guys, by the way, I didn't introduce Stephen, but you've got to go back and listen to the first time he was on our show last year. But for those of you unfamiliar, Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author. He's a speaker and a coach. And, some of your many, many books you've written, some of the favorites in Men's Alliance are Building Your Band of Brothers, Stephen Mansfield's book of Manly Men. That's a great one that I've read with my sons. And then your new one, Catching Fire, right? Men on Fire.
It's called Men on Fire. Yeah,
Men on Fire we talk so much about fire. We have Start the Fire. We got Carry the Fire. So your book, Men on Fire, is what we really talked a lot about in our last podcast. One of the best books, guys. You've got to read all of these. Stephen Mansfield is like the voice in our culture for Christian manhood, biblical masculinity. Just absolutely can't promote him and his books enough. They've really formed and shaped a lot of Men's Alliance, to include The Search for God and Guinness, a book that Stephen Mansfield wrote about the history of the beer that changed Christianity, the church, and the world. Right. So if you're a Christian and you enjoy beer, you've got to check out that fun book. I learned a lot about it. Very educational, a lot of history in it. So you guys, that's who's with us today. Stephen Mansfield's website, by the way, and we're going to put this in the show notes, but stephenmansfield.tv is where you can get him. And plus, as if that's not all enough and you're not busy enough and doing all this stuff, he actually has two podcasts, right? So the Stephen Mansfield podcast and also the Great Man podcast. Both are excellent. So guys, that's who we've got with us today. If you didn't know who Stephen Mansfield was already, you need to crawl out from under the rock you live under and check him out. So the thing I want to start with today is you've been posting a lot, talking a lot about what's going on currently in the world, especially in the Middle East. Give us your thoughts on this. What do you see happening?
Well, I think we're about to have a serious conflict in the Middle East. We already have one, but it's relatively low grade, as horrible as the Israel-Gaza tension is. The fact is that that's relatively low grade. I mean, it's a tragedy. A lot of people killed, a lot of starvation. Hamas knew that this was coming. They picked this fight on purpose, violating a ceasefire. But for example, it's broadening quite a bit. The U.S. has struck within Iran in the last few days. Israel struck Hezbollah up in Lebanon. So it's very possible that we're going to have a multifaceted regional war there. Other actors are beginning to move in. So I'm not saying World War, 3 or 4. I'm just saying that it's gonna ramp up. And, a lot of this is a result, and I'm not making a political commentary here. A lot of this is a result of the fact that a lot of the world believes the U.S. is in decline.
Yeah.
They talk about it openly. I've been sitting in those meetings where they say, well, you got a doddering president. You've got a huge national debt. You can't control your southern border. Hey, if you can't control your southern border, how are you going to protect Taiwan? That kind of
Yeah.
attitude. And so that's what's going on. I think that I know I sound like I'm reflecting, I'm maybe echoing certain political commentators. I'm not. This is my own analysis. Our exit from Afghanistan was disastrous. It was politically motivated, and it signaled to the world that, we're not serious. After 20 years and thousands of lives, American lives, we up and left it, dropping people off of airplanes at, 2,000 feet. And that just sent a signal around the world. So, this isn't all about America, but I think that we're gonna be tested in various locations around the world, the Persian Gulf, Taiwan, Middle East, and maybe even closer to home with some terrorist action. So it's a dire situation. And one of my good friends was Congressman Mark Green. Just yesterday, as we're recording this, he resigned his role, announced that he was resigning his committee assignments. He's going to step out of Congress. And
Wow.
he says, I still want to provide political leadership. I still want to be a player in DC, but this House is dysfunctional, meaning the
Mm.
Congress. So my point is not to bring a lot of bad news. My point is to say it's time for good men to arise.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we're going to have some. I think you know about how old I am. I hope I have decades more on the earth. I expect those decades to be filled with at least regional wars for the rest of my life until some of these things get resolved, if they ever are.
Yeah. Man, and hearing you say this, it's very poignant to me because of the fact that you have not been a gloom and doom guy.
No,
You've never been the guy saying all this stuff about, oh, we got to prepare and war's coming and stuff. So when you've started saying this, it's really caught a lot of people's attention. They're like, man, this is not coming from a guy that you would expect this from, but you
right?
are a guy with tremendous political insight, right? You spend a lot of time inside the Beltway.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. One of the things I've worked hard to do is to not need to raise money for what I do. Now that sounds crazy, but when you are I'm not, there's nothing wrong with raising money. I speak at fundraising events
Right,
for
right.
causes I care about and so on. I'm not putting that down, God knows. Some of my dearest friends are some of the biggest fundraisers in the country. But for me, I think that people can are trusting my input a bit more, both
Yeah,
because as you say, I do have a presence in DC. I live there half the year, and in the White House and up on the Hill all the time. But also, I'm not selling books about politics. I'm not running an organization where I say it's all going to hell, but I can fix it. Send me money. That kind of attitude.
yeah.
So I think it allows people to trust a little bit more that if I'm saying it, I've gotten in trouble for complimenting Democrats and complimenting Republicans both. I've gotten
Yeah,
in
that
trouble
was my
for,
other thought is you've been very bipartisan,
yeah, yeah. I'm,
in
I'm
all of
moderate.
your writing.
Thank you for noting that. I'm moderate.
Yeah.
I believe there are good people on both sides. I think there are mistakes on both sides. So all that to say, the rarity of being a moderate who is not raising money to support his message has given me a bit more of a hearing in DC. To put it in the language my grandmother used to use, my hair is not on fire. I'm not running
Yeah.
around like a crazy man. Oh my God, And so I can sit calmly and have a conversation with people. And I'm not the only one, God knows. But the point is that that's the tone that you're identifying, and I appreciate it very much. I really want to help make a difference. And there were some things I realized early on I couldn't be if I was going to be heard. You can't sit with a president and then rush out and write an article betraying that conversation and have that ever get invited back into the Oval Office, you know.
Right. Right.
So I'm a guy who's as likely to say good things about him as bad things about him because I just want the truth. So anyway, thanks for saying that. Very kind.
Yeah, and we had on the show just a few weeks ago, we had Victor Marks on talking about his organization and the work they're doing. And when he was on the show, I think he had just come back. I think it was like 48 hours ago from being in Gaza, and our podcast with him. And if you guys listen, if you haven't heard this, go check it out. Our podcast with him took like an odd turn because he started saying exactly what you're saying. And that podcast, it kind of took a little bit of a turn towards prepping, right?
Yeah.
Because he started really saying a lot of what your message is about war's coming. And I asked him, I was like, are you saying that you think we're about to experience an attack on American soil? And he was like, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
my question for you on this topic, what can we as average Joe Christian men around this country, what should we be doing? What can we do in light of everything that you're saying?
Well, let me divide up my response to this question into two halves. The practical I'll come to in a minute.
Okay.
But the first thing we can do is to resist the temptation to get sucked into the storm of opinion and anger that dominates our conversation. Okay,
Yeah.
making it a little bit silly for a moment. If Taylor Swift going to a football game is a big sinking deal, and this was actually crafted in the Oval Office to get Biden back into office, my response is, so what? When has a movie star or a music performer ever moved the ball that far down the field for any candidate? Is this what we're going to talk about? Is this what we're going to be upset about? Is this what we're going to, fill the airways with? I'm saying that to make a point. That is, that one of the best things men can do right now is to get centered, get calm, understand the times. We're talking to Christian men. I'm a devoted Christian. We believe in a sovereign God. We believe he's put us in this generation for such a time as this. Let's not freak out at every new news story, right? Horrible things are happening. But what we most need men to be, and I'm not saying men as opposed to women, but men have a special gift to be centered, to be calm, to take hold of God, to radiate that calm in the context they're in, and to begin to prepare for whatever needs to come next. And a lot of what's happened in our generation is that men who want to be good, men who want to be noble, the kind of guys you and I speak to, they do tend to get sucked into the politics of left and right and the news stories and the incendiary stuff and the conspiracy theories. And, Scripture actually warns us against getting sucked into conspiracy theories. Don't call everything conspiracy, they call conspiracy, one of the
Right.
prophets says. And my point is that I think that if we're serious Christian men, we believe we're called to this generation for such a time as this. There needs to be a calm. There needs to be a confidence in God's sovereignty. There needs to be a stepping back a little bit from the latest wacko conspiracy theory. I'm going to tell you honestly, I know almost everybody involved in this silly situation with Taylor, and I don't have a clue if anybody ever said, "Well, let's get her to the Super Bowl so we can push Biden." I doubt it, but I'm just saying, what difference does it make? And why would I lose my peace? And why would I be stirred up? So the first thing I urge men to do is to realize you're living in troubled times. You're called to these times. I love what Paul said in, I believe it's 1 Thessalonians 3:3. He said, don't be troubled by our hardships. Don't you know we were destined for them? And I get
I
up,
love
I
it.
get up every morning, and I go, whatever's going to happen today, a sovereign God has put me in it. And because of what I do, I'm not bragging. I'm in the middle of some pretty major stuff, and I just go, this is what I'm meant to handle. And I got the resources from the Holy Spirit to do it. I'll bond with other good men, and we'll face this thing. I'm not talking about personal crises. My personal life's fantastic. I'm talking about what we face in our society.
Right.
I've got because I help at chaplain in an NFL football team. I am connected to stuff that happens in the NFL. Well, here we are. I didn't care who won that particular Super Bowl. I just enjoyed the good game. But then the chiefs have a celebratory parade, and what happens? 21 people are shot, one person's killed
Mm.
at a gang shooting, basically during this thing. Well, this is the horror of what's going on in our times. So I believe that to the small extent that I have anything to do with that, I'm called to do that. So it makes me centered, it makes me calm, it makes me peaceful, it makes me pulling on the resources of God. But the other side of what we're going to have to do is prepare. The fact is that I know that it's very likely that my family, my growing family, um, wife, kids, grandkids, and also our buddies, our broader, or the Greek word in New Testament, we oikos, our household, other people who associate with us, um, that we're going to go through some tough times. That we may go through actual invasion of the U.S. We are definitely going to go through tough economic times. We're definitely going to go through hard times around the world. As Christians, we're going to be opposed. All right, how do you prepare for that? Well, there's some economic preparation. I'm not saying you shove crates of peanut butter under your bed, but you make sure that you're solid financially. I suggest people listen to the counsel of Dave Ramsey, getting out of debt and getting solid financially. Dave Ramsey's a friend, and I push his stuff everywhere I can. I suggest that you make sure your family's sound, that you're connected to a good church, that you're bonded with other men, you got community. You know what I'm saying? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and make the practical preparation. Do you have enough cash on hand to get through a shutdown of the banks? If as they're talking about in the press right now, Russia takes out one of our satellites and our banking system doesn't work for a few weeks, can you still pay your bills and feed yourself? It's just simple stuff like that. But I do recommend that men do that without going crazy and becoming, survivalists up on a mountain somewhere. So the bottom line, I know I'm going a little long with this answer, but I
Oh, it's
appreciate the
great.
question. The bottom line is, um, know that you're called to this time. Walk in the calm that ought to bring. Understand that we're destined for everything that happens, and therefore there are resources for it. And then bond with other men, have that band of brothers I talk about all the time, and begin to prepare so that you have, like I say, community and resources to face whatever comes. And, our grandmothers, great grandmothers shoved money into mattresses to get through the Great Depression.
Yep.
And I would say, we've got to do our version of that, which doesn't have to be insane. But if you're up to your eyeballs in debt and you've spent your money on a lot of toys and your financial house isn't solid and your family's not solid spiritually and in church and you don't have a community to get through things, I mean, you should be nervous about what's coming. And I think that's it's easy to fix in those directions. So that's what I urge.
Man, that's awesome. I think, the message of being calm and being centered is so important, not just as Christians, which it is vital, but also just as men, right?
Yes.
There's something about manhood that we're supposed to be foundational, right? And something steady and dependable. And, men, especially as Christian men, we cannot afford to be going crazy on any extreme end, right? We need to be solid. We need to be prepared. We need to be dependable. And we need to be that calm in the middle of the storm. Because here's the reason why I think it's so important is because the calm in the middle of a storm is very attractive.
Yes.
And how are you going to influence your community or the unsaved people on your street if you're not the calm center of the storm, right? And I think,
Yeah.
the reason why as Christians we should be prepared for whatever sort of disaster comes our way is so that we can continue to be that light on the hill, the salt of the earth, right? And if we're so unprepared that we're our hair's on fire, like you said,
Right.
how are we going to be able to witness to anybody around us? Nobody's going to want to, be drawn towards that guy. So super important there. I want to move now to topic number 2 with you.
Go for it.
Total change of topics here. You wrote a book, I think in 2012, that I did not mention when I was introducing you, that I didn't know you had written. It kind of somehow flew below my Stephen Mansfield radar until last year. And I read this book last year after we had had our podcast together, and I saw this. I was like, "Oh wait, this is by Stephen Mansfield. I got to read this," and it blew me away. So I'm so glad that we've got you on to talk about it, guys. Listen to this title of Stephen Mansfield's book. It's called "Healing Your Church Hurt: What to do when you still love God, but have been wounded by his people. I mean, wow, if that title doesn't capture you and make you want to read the book, you haven't been a Christian for very long. I'll tell you that. So, one of the things I loved about this book is it is applicable to every Christian, whether you've experienced church hurt or not. Guarantee you've been wounded by some Christians. So, Steve, if you could share with us a little bit about what you talk about in this book in regards to the snare, the trap, and resentment. I think men need to hear that message right now.
Well, I do too, and I appreciate you saying that. I wrote the book for two reasons. One, my buddy George Barna had just done a survey connected with the book, in which he discovered that about 40% of non-church attending America are actually wounded ex-church members. In other words, we think of them being unchurched. We use that phrase in missiology, or that word in missiology. But the fact is that 40% of those people who are unchurched are actually wounded ex-church. So if we're gonna kind of re-evangelize America, re-evangelize the West, we've got to be aware of that. Then the other thing is that even people who attend church can tend to do it a little bit tensed up. Like if you're one of those guys who has a tendency just to punch a guy in the arm just out of nowhere, I'll be around you, but I'm going to be a little tensed up around you, just like, when am I going to get popped? And some people feel that way when they're in church. Um, the fact is that I believe in a devil, obviously from Scripture, and the Bible says that we must be very careful not to step into the snare or the trap of the enemy. And it's specifically the context here. This is in Timothy. The context here is taking the trap of offense. Well, it's interesting to me. I've done a little hunting and trapping in my life, and we've all seen, even just watching the cartoon, The Road Runner. I'm going to lift my hands into the camera here. The kind of trap that's like this, and then it closes on an animal's leg.
Oh yeah.
There's bait in the middle here, and then when an animal touches it, it closes on them. Um, well, it's interesting that to be offended in the Bible, the word that the Holy Spirit uses is a Greek word, obviously from the first century, that is scandalon. We get our word scandal from it. And what it actually means is, literally the meaning of this word is the part of a trap on which the bait is set. So if you've ever done any trapping, again, as I say, there's a little plate in the middle, and it's got the stinky stuff, the guts of an animal, or the whatever lure you're using. And that plate where the bait is set, that's what it means to be offended. So as we go through our lives, we have many opportunities to be offended, to take the trap or take the bait of a trap that has been set for us. And if we do that, if I thought about commissioning an artist to make a trap like that, to draw a trap like that, put the bait in the middle, but make these the prongs syringes, because when that trap closes on you, it injects the poison of bitterness into your soul. Hebrews 12:15 tells us not to let a root of bitterness arise. And the word bitterness there, pikros in Greek. I'm sorry, I enjoy the Greek language, so I bring it up
This
all
is
the time.
great. We're getting a lesson.
Pikros means a bilious, poisonous substance. So that's what injects into your soul. So we all know when we've had seasons of bitterness in our lives. We all know people who can't ask you, pass the salt at a dinner table without somehow bringing up some bitterness, right? We're all talking about the football game, and what do? They bring up the father they're ticked off about and have been for 40 years, that kind of thing. So one of the arts of Christian living is to avoid the trap of offense as best we can. And I am a committed church guy. I'm not one of these guys who's pulled away from the church, pox on all their houses kind of attitude. I actually joke that I live in two cities. I'm a member of two churches. I'm definitely going to heaven. Uh, but I've got to tell you, both of them are large, thriving, happening churches, and they're filled with sinners. So
Yeah.
there's going to be a chance to be offended, right? I mean, pastors are both my friends, but who knows? They say something stupid, or I don't know what, do something. You never know what people are going to get offended about. I've known churches to split over the striping of the parking lot. I've known churches to split over what the pastor's wife is wearing. I mean, people are sinners. And so you can be sure that if you're hanging out with human beings, you're going to have an opportunity to be offended. And church is a little bit more a ripe opportunity for offense, not because they're bad, but just because our expectations are so high.
Yeah.
I love my churches. I love that Jesus is there. I love what they teach me. I preach and teach a lot in my own church and those churches as well because they asked me to help. Happy to do it. But you have to remember that a church is not heaven. That all those people singing in the choir, they have angelic natures, and they also have, that fallen nature. And so they can be in the choir one moment and say something stupid over lunch that hurts your feelings. I mean, it's just how it goes. So, what we have to do is realize that being in church is essential and valuable. We're commanded to do it. It's where we grow. It's where we thrive. It's God's A plan, as people say. At the same time, there's going to be a chance for offense. And people will handle things badly. There will be splits. There will be hassles. There will be fights over the money or over who to hire for the youth minister or what have you. And of course, in our recent generation, we've had a lot of people really engaged in criminal activity, sexual abuse of minors and things like that. We've pastoral suicides that are at all-time high. I mean, the church is troubled in America, but we still need to be there. We still need to be involved. We need to bring all the man gifts that we have to help it be strong and solid. At the same time, we got to guard our hearts and not take the trap of offense every time that trap is presented to us, because it is a conspiracy of the enemy to destroy us. Um, I don't spend a lot of time at the end of bars, but when I have been near them, what do I see? A lot of guys who are half drunk, and what are they doing? They're griping about something that happened 30 years ago. My father did this, or that coach did that thing, or my first wife did so and so. Well, what are they doing? They're destroying their lives, medicating bitterness that's happened because they took the trap of offense. You can go through hard times and not let it, not as my Pentecostal friends say, get any on you. And
Yeah.
so that's what we've got to do as men. I love the church. I love the Church of Jesus. I love the churches I'm involved in. But I say this with a smile. I'm not stupid. I know there's going to be a chance to be offended. Somebody's going to say something in a sermon that maybe I don't like. You know, I'll give you a small, tiny example. Just in my case, I'm Native American, so um, if I wanted to, every time anybody does, some joke about Indians or woo 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 or chop, or whatever stuff, I suppose I could get all lit up and get upset. You follow what I mean?
Yep.
Uh, so now I got lots of opportunity to be ticked off. So I could easily be a guy who's like, that Anglo church doesn't get me. I'm going to go away. I'll worship the Great Spirit. Screw these guys. I mean, there's lots of opportunity if you're Native American or if you're black or if you're a female. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's just lots of opportunity to be upset. In fact, if you're just a human being, there's opportunity to be upset. Um, so what we've got to realize is, look, the world's filled with opportunities to take the trap of offense. That trap clamps on you and injects you with bitterness that can taint you the rest of your life. And when you're bitter, you feel entitled, you're angry, you pull away, you medicate, it destroys your life. So we've got to be better than that. And that's why I wrote the book. I was a pastor for 20 some years. I always knew I would pastor about half my life and then move into what I'm doing now, which is a lot of writing and television and coaching and politics and things like that, where I can have a more direct impact on the outer world. But my exit from that church got complicated by the fact that at that moment, my wife at the time decided to leave our marriage. So now I couldn't just make a gracious effort. Now it's got to be about the fact that the Mansfields are going through a divorce. And so what did Stephen do? And what about this? And then there's gossip at Starbucks. And I'm not trying to pick that fight again. That's 20 years old. I'm just saying that could have ruined me forever. I
Right.
could be 900 pounds, having medicated with Oreos and sat at the end of the bar all day and let my life be destroyed, my kids be embittered, and none of the fruit that I've been able to bear in the last 20 some years. You understand what I mean? Total loss. Why? Divorce is a horrible thing. Shouldn't have happened. At the same time, you've got to go through it without it going through you over and over again for the rest of your life. And fortunately, I had good men around me, and we got through it. And I was able to emerge on the other side, ready to bear fruit. That's how you have to approach all the opportunities for bitterness in your life.
Wow, man, that was some real talk right there. I appreciate you sharing that so much. Our motto in Men's Alliance is tribal, rugged, real. And that's the real part right there is we don't want to be the organization that answers fine when we're asked how we're doing. And,
Good.
when I think to the church hurt that I've experienced, your book helped me kind of like, examine it like a detective. Like, let's look back at it. Why was I feeling hurt? What happened? Let's investigate this thing. And what I really learned after reading your book was I got hurt because I had put the church and the church leaders on a pedestal that they never should have been on in the first place, right?
Yes,
And I
sure.
think so many people do this with church, and like you said, I'm not stupid, right? And I think
Right.
if we kind of just like and so many people do this, they really idolize their church or they idolize their pastor or whatever the case may be. And we've got to constantly realize like that place is flawed. It's run by men who are flawed, and that's okay. And they're gonna
Yes,
hurt me, and they're gonna, they're gonna do stuff that's it's objectively rude,
sure.
right? It's not the proper thing. And but that's okay. We don't need some knee jerk reaction and exit the church and slander the person. What we need to do is realize, yep, they're human. I'm human. I've probably been rude to them and hurt them as well. And I think when we all just kind of like de-escalate, you know, um, the level to which we have put churches and pastors and Christian friends and ministry leaders, when we start to realize that, we stop being so shocked when
Yeah.
we discover their imperfections, right? So for me, that was my personal thing that I really got from your book is I realized like it was my fault because I shouldn't have, you know, kind of put all my eggs in that church basket of this is going to be the end all be all place. It's going to, fulfill me spiritually. It's like, whoa, you are really setting yourself up in that scenario for hurt as I
Yeah,
had.
and you know, buddy, the Bible tells us to guard our hearts. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that doesn't mean I have to go through all tensed up and expecting a blow every 5 seconds, but it does mean I can be in a church, I can be fully committed, I can be serving wherever it is I'm supposed to serve, I can be helping, but I just don't expect it to be heaven, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world's, you know, sin's made us all. There's the Christian geologists tell us that all the rocks in the world are cracked, and so
I
I
like
so
I like
I
that.
yeah, they're all cracked, and that has to do with some geological things that even the scriptures describe. And so I make a joke out of that and say, well, so are all the people. All the people a little bit cracked,
Yep.
right? I mean, I think you're great, and I admire what you do very much. If we're hanging out as buddies, you just need to know that, I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm not
Yep.
telling you I got some deep dark secret. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna whip out on you, that I'm cross dressing or beating people or trafficking children, or I mean, I don't mean to laugh about that. I'm just saying I don't have any deep
Yeah.
dark secret. I just might be impatient someday, or I might cancel an appointment, or I might, I don't know, late some night when I'm not quite guarded and a little tired, I don't know, say something a little hurtful. I don't intend to, but that's just how it is in
Yeah.
life. That's just how we are. And so if we can't forgive and move on, and also, by the way, have the self-correcting system of our relationships, right, where you're able to say to me, Stephen, man, that's not really appropriate. Let's not do that. Right, okay, thank you for helping me. Thank you for guarding me at a tired, unguarded moment. So anyway, men have a tendency, with a combination of their tenderness and their anger, to get ticked off at church and refuse to go back. And then
Hmm.
we take our families with us, and then generations can be tainted by our anti-church bitterness and anger. And I beg the men watching this to guard your heart, realize people are flawed, have the kind of relationships with those who lead your church where you can talk to them and say, man, I'm a little concerned about some of the things you're saying, or are you aware that the youth ministers, meeting with the girls on the side, or whatever's going on. Um, and you can help bring correction and yet still be a loving, fun, effective, fruit-bearing guy. That's what we need to be. And we're going to
Yeah.
need the positive side of our churches more than ever in the future. I mean,
Absolutely.
again, as you've said, I'm not gloom and doom, but I'm also not stupid, that we need all the resources that our churches bring. And I've been involved in tiny churches, and I've attended churches of 20, 30,000. I've led a church of 4 or 5,000. I mean, the reason I mention those numbers is, let me just assure you, no matter the size,
Yeah.
no matter the wealth, no matter how many acres we occupy, they've all got some of the same dynamics. And we just need to get through it, love each other, and there's only one perfect, and he's yet to come back. So we got to
Ain't
just
that the
hang in there.
truth?
Yeah, exactly.
Would you say that being offended is a choice? Do we
It,
choose to allow ourselves to get offended?
It's always a choice. It's always
Mm,
a choice. Now that I need to say that may be different from the moral evaluation of the situation you're in. For example, let me continue to use you just because we're safe. You and I are buddies, and you do something criminal. Let's say you do something criminally bad or stupid, sinful, wrong, or I do, either one of us. Well, the one of us who didn't do it, we have to be involved. We have to know. We have to help. But that we make a decision as to whether we surrender our hearts to deformity. I mean, I have been in the midst of
mm,
horrible deaths. I've been in the midst of exposing criminal activity amongst my own church members. When you're a pastor, especially of a church of size like I've been, you're in the middle of all kinds of stuff. Stars on the road getting drunk, and because we're here, my church was in Nashville. We had all kinds of stars attending the church, and
mm.
you just who knows what's going to happen with those people. I love them all, but my gosh, their lives are at a whole nother height. My point is that the situation you're in and your role in helping to fix it is not the same thing as your choice to surrender your heart to it, to be damaged by it. So I 100% believe, that's why Scripture I think uses that image. You can see an opportunity for offense and not reach in and touch that plate on which the bait is set and have that thing close on you. And so, as I've learned that in life, because I will admit what we're talking about right now was earlier in my Christian life one of my weaknesses. I had a good war hero military father, but he was a bit harsh with his big son, who he was a little afraid his son was going to go amok. And so he treated me a bit like he would treat a private or a sergeant. He was a bit harsh, and it was a bit wounding. Love him as I do. He's passed on now, and we became very close later. Well, that left me with some hypersensitivity. So even though I'm 6'4" and 900 whatever pounds I am, big guy, uh, the fact is that I was very sensitive. Well, so I've found in my life that offenses could stick to me as though I was coated in Velcro, right?
Mm.
I just would let them stick to, and then I'd be walking around, walking to school, whatever, by myself driving, and I'd be rehearsing my anger about that. Why did they do that to me? And then I'd be talking in an empty car like I was talking to that person. And I just realized I was letting the poison of bitterness cycle through my soul. So I began to realize under the urging of some good brothers that I had a choice. You can go through a tough situation. You can even be mistreated. You can sustain blows. You can be in the midst of terrible, bloody, violent, terrible situations that you might have to deal with in life. You have a choice as to whether you surrender your heart to it and emerge deformed.
Yeah.
And so uh, now one of the things my firm does that most of your audience won't even know is we're often called in to handle leadership crises of the big international type. The famous CEO crashes, the congressman blows it, and the FBI's at the door. What those we're often called in to fix the leadership crash. So we've been in the midst of some real gut-wrenching stuff, and you really can't emerge on the other side without having been deformed or tainted by it, or again, as I laughingly quote my Pentecostal friends, getting in on you.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can come on the other side and not have it stick to you. You've got to have a choice, or the scriptures wouldn't hold you responsible for emerging clean. And so that when I realized that made all the difference. And now I'm not the hypersensitive, insecure person I once was. I'm actually very willing to step into a crisis because I know how to go through it without being damaged by it, and therefore I'm solid enough to help other people in that crisis. And that's what we were. This kind of cycles back to the first thing we were talking about in our time together today, about men being calm and together and not with their hair on fire and radiating calm and peace and solving the problem. When you realize you don't have to surrender your heart to what's going on, but you can be solid and peaceful and calm and a change agent within it, that's when you really start being, I think, the best of a man.
Wow, that's so good. So, guys, I want you to catch this because we live in a culture right now that is literally egging people, pushing them towards being offended. It like the soil is fertile for offense, and everybody is getting offended over everything. Like you were talking about, you're Native American, and you could choose to get offended about that. Um, being offended is always a choice. And, part of this analogy that I love so much about this bear trap is that the bait that's in the middle of it, it's real,
Yes.
right? And so like that hurt, that wrong that other person has done to us, it is real, right? It's not imaginary. It is wrong. They did something wrong, and that is very real. That's what makes the snare so attractive.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
let me,
makes the trap
exactly,
enticing.
exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go
Uh,
for it.
yeah, and let me just preach just for a second. If we're looking at the counsel of Scripture, the Bible says that the devil is constantly scanning us to see how he can destroy us.
Yep.
So there is a demonic, literally, I won't break out the Greek because I've done it so much, but literally there's a strategy
Yeah.
against you and against me. The enemy and his minions are trying to figure out how he can destroy Stephen. And so there is bait uniquely for us, right? Like, there are certain offenses that you and I both would just blow off, wouldn't be a big deal, but there are some that are maybe very tender to us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to fake what those might be, but I mean, you can imagine everybody's got stuff they're sensitive about, tender
Mhm.
about. One guy's not touched that much by lust, another guy is. One guy's not touched that much about his ethnicity or his weight or I don't know, his special needs child or whatever. Since
Satan knows what bait to use for us,
he
doesn't
knows
he?
what to use exactly. Just like I say humorously, I do like Oreos quite a bit, and I don't eat them very much, but when I do, I enjoy them. So Satan's not going to put chocolate covered cherries on that plate in that bait in that trap for me because I don't care about those. And I
Right.
don't care about truffles or whatever else crazy stuff. But he might put Oreos on there. And that's just
Yeah.
a humorous way of saying that there's bait that works for all of us. Well, what you want to figure out eventually is what is the bait that he's using because he's not using brand new tactics, right? So um, I think that you need to be aware. I kind of know what it is for me. Uh, and I'm not going to tell I'm not going to tell everybody on the air, but I mean, there's just
Yeah.
certain bait that might be put on a plate that would cause me to be offended and hurt. But
Yeah.
given my unique history and my unique psychology, same for you. Um, so once you start paying attention, it's a little bit like the famous movie Groundhog Day. Huh? I sure have been here before. I've seen
Yeah.
those Oreos stacked on a plate before. Huh? Maybe there's a tactic against me. Maybe there's a strategy. I'm not going to be stupid. How many times do you have to get hit in the head when you reach for an Oreo before you realize you shouldn't reach for the Oreo,
Right.
humorously speaking. Of course, there's nothing wrong with Oreos. So I think that as the guys listening to this podcast figure out and look at their lives and examine themselves a little bit, maybe with the help of their band of brothers, and say, you know what, the same dang tactic's been used on me for years and it's brought defeat. I'm going to defeat this sucker. And help. I want you to help me.
Yeah.
That makes all the difference.
And I think too, like if you're in anything long enough, you're gonna get hurt by it, right? If you're in a relationship long enough, whether your best friend, he's gonna hurt you. A marriage relationship, you give it enough decades, you're gonna get hurt. A church, you go to a church long enough, you're gonna get hurt. You go to Men's Alliance long enough, you're gonna get hurt.
Sure.
I'm gonna say something stupid that hurts you. Um, but with all that being true, if you allow yourself to get offended and you allow yourself to get injected with bitterness, you have just taken yourself out of the game because you got caught in the snare that was set for you. And I think the only way to go through life is when you get hurt, see that snare in front of you for what it is, acknowledge the bait that's been put in it, and then walk around it and keep
Yes.
going. Stay
Yes.
on course. Don't get sidetracked, getting all offended by this, that, and the other thing. Nobody's perfect. Your pastor's not perfect. I'm not perfect, right? Your wife's not perfect. Life is about choosing to not get offended, moving around these snares, and keep moving forward.
Yes.
So, guys, I just can't recommend this book highly enough. Check it out, Church Hurt, because like the subtitle implies, it's if you've ever been wounded by any Christian, right? It's a book for you. So, thank you for writing that. By the way, I'm sure it has helped countless people, and it certainly helped me. Hey guys, is money holding you back from being used by God? If finances are a problem in your life and you're looking for some help, some counsel, some assistance financially, you've got to check out the Main Street Group. It's run by Tom Love, call sign Doc, with Tuckahoe Tribe. Okay, Doc is a certified financial planner. He's a fee-only fiduciary. He's a Dave Ramsey SmartVestor Pro. He uses Charles Schwab assets. He will help get you on course in ways that you didn't even know you were off course. He's not just a sponsor of the podcast, but my wife Carrie and I, we use him for our finances personally. He's helped us a ton. He's been ranked number 2 in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, number 1 in Style Weekly. He's a top 40 under 40 investor. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes. He is the man to see to get you on course financially. God saved Tom spiritually and physically, and God is the reason for Tom's success, and he wants to help others succeed also. So whenever you go see Tom Love, a.k.a. Doc, don't forget to mention that you are a part of Men's Alliance, and he will donate your first year of fees back to Men's Alliance nonprofit 501c3. So he's not only helping you, but he's helping our ministry as well. So do yourself a favor, go see the Main Street Group with Tom Love. It's in the show notes. Check it out. And as always, Dave Ramsey and Charles Schwab are separate entities, and past performance is no guarantee of future results. Check him out, the Main Street Group, Tom Love. In just like our last, about 5 to 10 minutes here, the third thing I really wanted to try to hit on was you've made some posts and said some things about how we are perhaps over-medicating our young boys in this culture. And I completely agree with you, and I've got all my personal story about my sons, but talk to us just a little bit about that and give us your thoughts and your opinion on that situation.
Well, let me say, first of all, that I'm not an MD. I don't have a medical degree. I want to make sure I have to say that because I'm often listed as Dr. Mansfield. I do have a PhD in history and literature, but I'm not one of the, I am not an MD, and I refuse to be one of those guys who got his medical degree on Google. You know what I mean? Going around giving medical opinions. However, the fact is that boys are unique, and they often cause problems in schools, and especially when they're compared with girls. And in our modern drug culture kind of society, they often get diagnosed and are given drugs. The fact is that boys are very unique. If I was king of the world, this is going to be a radical opinion, but if I was king of the world, I probably would educate boys and girls separately up until college. And that's not for necessarily moral reasons. I'm all fine with dating and them learning how to be gracious with each other and so on. But boys just develop at radically different speeds than girls. Boys and girls, boys of the same age as a girl can be as much as 5 years behind a girl, all through the elementary years, latter elementary years, middle school and high school years. So you can have a boy and a girl who are both 13, and the boy could be as much as 5 years behind the girl. But we have what some people call conveyor belt schools. I don't mean that as a negative. I just mean to describe a dynamic. They're all expected to move forward at the same level, right? They all go through the same material at the same speed. They all are supposed to graduate to the next class. But boys are different in that regard. And I mean no insult when I say they may be years behind intellectually. Well, now they're labeled as stupid because they're not keeping up with the girls. Now, this levels off in college, and by the end of college, boys and girls are at about the same level in terms of their intellectual development and the biological aspects of the brain that I won't bore everybody with right now. But brain scientists are confirming this. Boys they don't always do, but they can be as much as 5 years behind because they're just developing differently. The other thing is that boys nurture each other in different ways. If you and I are in the same high school and you're my buddy, and I see you standing at your locker, it's very likely I'm going to walk by and just gently push you into your locker.
Exactly.
Just push you. And all I'm doing is saying good morning, right?
Yeah, that's right. If you didn't shove me against my locker or hit me in the arm, I'd be like, something's wrong.
What's wrong with Mansfield? Well, but if a teacher sees that, obviously, especially a female teacher, and I'm not putting down female teachers, they made a massive difference in my life, and we're grateful for them. But a female teacher might think, well, Stephen's being violent. He's bullying. Which we obviously want to be against bullying in our society. I'm very much against it, and help protect boys who have been bullied. But that's not bullying. That's me saying good morning in that male rough language. Even if you and I start kind of duking it out in the hallway. We're not necessarily, it's hard for people to understand this. We're not necessarily having a fight. We're maybe dissipating energy. We may be having fun. We may be sharpening our skills. Now we've got to know that we can't do it in the middle of the school hallway, but
Right.
it's hard for us. It's hard for us, you know. I mean, remember the lessons of Fight Club. So all of that to say, that what's happening is that boyhood is being medicated because it's out of the norm. It doesn't move according to the conveyor belt. It's not keeping up with Susie. And I love Susie. I'm not resenting Susie, but Johnny may not be able to keep up with Susie, and therefore he's medicated. Um, I thank God that a lot of these diagnoses were not in existence when I was in school. Um, I did I didn't do that well academically. I mean, I was thrilled to pull B's. If I got a D, believe me, my colonel father just landed on me like a ton of bricks. I'm sure I was hyperactive. I'm bigger than most kids, and I'm very physical. Couldn't wait to get to football practice. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes got in fights, not often. Usually I was ending fights. I just had that nature. But my point is that I'm sure the teachers would have sent me in for some kind of
Yeah.
analysis and drugging as a result. So there's a great article in Esquire from some years ago. You guys can look it up. It's called The Drugging of the American Boy. I use it a lot when I do my presentations. We've got the article in our keynotes and all that. But I'm very concerned about this. Boys get labeled. Um, that label could stick with them for the rest of their lives. The drugs are not always safe, and they certainly aren't always necessary. Now, listen, let me just say, I'm not a guy who's anti-drug. Get what you need, right? You need
Right.
something. I mean,
Yeah.
I only talk about myself so much to set guys at ease. I'm in my early 60s. I have a family history of high blood pressure. I take 3 prescription meds a day. I'm not some nut who's opposed to all drugs all the time, everywhere. But if you're given a 12-year-old boy a shot every day or a shot a week or whatever it is, whatever's prescribed, um, to modify his hyperactivity or the fact that he's overly rowdy on the playground at recess, you could be doing him a huge disservice. And
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily advocating homeschool as the only way to go, but one of the reasons homeschools are so good with boys is that the moms and the dads understand the unique nature of the boy, let him have a bit more time to blow off steam, be in sports, do that kind of thing, and then work with his unique nature, his unique bent, as the scriptures say, raise up a child
Hmm.
according to his bent, according to the way he's DNA. And homeschools have been phenomenally successful for boys. So have boys' schools because they recognize all that. A good boys' school increases the amount of physical activity, um, adds physical activity to connect it even to like math studies and stuff like that, does more laboratory, actual hands-on, hold the lizard, cut him open kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Because boys get into all that. But you sit a boy in a school and say, sit there and think great thoughts for 7 hours, he's going to blow a gasket. And so I'm glad that doctors are in the world. Most of a good chunk of my friends are doctors. I'm glad that medication's in the world, but I think we may be medicating the wrong thing. And I had real quickly to close. I had a fifth grade teacher say in front of me to my mother, Stephen's immature and retarded. Now, it turned out later she was talking about my reading speed, but that's not what I understood when I was in the fifth
Right.
grade. That haunted me through college. And I'm not trying to paint myself as the muscle guy after being the 97-pound weakling, but I got a bachelor's, master's, doctorate. I write books. I lecture at Harvard and Yale and military academies. My point is, I'm fine. But during my school years, I did the typical male thing and lagged behind and was hyperactive. And had I let the labels deform me, it very much could have kept me from all that God intended for me.
Yeah.
And who knows, sent me into addiction and other things. So I'm sensitive to this, not for my sake, but because even the medical community is beginning to say, hang on, they're just boys. And we can't let a teacher say, wow, they're disruptive. I need for them to calm down and then drug them any more than we should give somebody a bottle of whiskey because they're rowdy at a corporate conference meeting, a corporate conference table. And hey, have 4 or 5 drinks so you shut up. We would never do that, but we're doing it with boys in another
Mm.
way. And so I think we need to be very careful about that. And the medical community needs to step up.
Absolutely agree with you. I'm not anti meds either. I've been through this with one of my sons where we pulled him out of middle school after his teachers were telling me, that he was just a constant disruption.
Sure.
And I was in a meeting with him, and I was like, "Well, don't you guys have don't you have some techniques to help a student like this? You know, you guys all went to school to learn how to be teachers, and here's
Yeah,
this student. And they said, honestly, we don't have the time. We have to keep the train moving in the classroom for
absolutely.
everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So if your son is you know, running in a different direction from our train, that's not our problem. We got to keep moving. And you know, I sold the idea of homeschool to my son by saying, listen, you can do one math problem and then go climb a tree and then come back in and do another problem. And he was like, I'm in. Right. And so I think so often, like you're saying, the problem is that we aren't giving them the outlet that they need. And, you know, we've got a lot of teenagers, 13, 14, 15, 16 in Men's Alliance who are out there, you know, swinging 30-pound sledgehammers. I had a guy tell me that the 30-pound sledgehammer was too heavy to swing. And so I sent him a video of my like 14-year-old at the time swinging it. And so if we give them the mission of flipping tires, swinging hammers, doing burpees
yes,
with the adults, with the grown men, and then having that devotion around the fire, I'm not saying Men's Alliance is like a silver bullet cure all, but it's a you know, it's one tool to have in your bag that you need
yes.
with your rowdy, rambunctious, hyperactive teenage son. Maybe you need to get out there with him, get in a tribe, and do some of this stuff. And we've said before, and I don't know where this quote came from. If I'm quoting somebody here, I've heard it and just used it so much, but that school systems treat boys like they are broken girls.
Yeah,
And I find that to be true, but also, and somebody's going to send me some hate mail on this one. I think this is true in churches. I think
can be, sure.
many churches are designed and set up in the same way the public school system is. It's sit down, it's be quiet, it's conform, it's stand when we say stand, sit when we say sit. We're all going to sing together, we're all going to hold hands. And a lot of men kind of bristle at that.
Yeah,
And we would rather go have a devotion outside around a fire. So I think whether it's your 13-year-old son having trouble in school, or you're a 45-year-old man having trouble in church, the problem is not always you. The problem might be the fact that you're trying to be fit into and molded into a form that you were not designed for.
yeah. And let me just say that one of the things I love about what you guys do, Men's Alliance, and so many other great organizations, including ours, is that we step into the lives of boys and we are there to narrate the male journey. This is very, very important.
That's good.
Um, Given the story I've just told you, my son didn't have to deal with if a teacher, he had awesome teachers, but if a teacher had said, you know, Jonathan is just rowdy and he's disruptive, I would have sat with that teacher and said, look, here's the deal. I'll work with him. I'll discipline him, but I want you to understand some things. And sometimes I could actually help the teacher to hand them a book, help them understand some things about boys. You know, in the typical public school educational certification process, they don't talk about male psychology. They don't talk about males developing differently from females for the most part. They may be a chapter in a book, but they move over it quickly. So the fact that you're there with the boy, the fact that you're narrating that journey to the Sunday school teacher, to the pastor. I had to do it a couple times with cops. You know, I'll tell you that story
Mm,
some other time. My son didn't do anything criminal. He just did something stupid. And
yeah.
thankfully, a cop found him, brought him to me. It happened to be a policeman I knew. And we did a little skit to scare the heck out of Jonathan. But my point is, it was even possible for me to say, well, this is him working out. He was 13. He was working out some kind of, am I really a man, by challenging moving cars, believe it or not.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, we all know that men are made differently. and boys are different. The good news about what you're doing, what I'm doing, is that we are there with the boy. It's when a boy has to walk alone. It's when he doesn't have a fathering presence in his life and he's thrown into a system of people who don't understand him. Well, no wonder he gets bitter. No wonder he drops out early. No wonder he starts medicating. No wonder he starts sleeping with everything that moves. Um, but if a man is there, if a man's present, if a man's on the school board, if we encourage the men, and not just the men, but the sympathetic women who are in the public school system or the private
Yeah.
school system, to understand and to step up and to defend and to protect, we can have a happy educational experience. Listen, this isn't new. This didn't start in the year 2000. This has been going on for generations. In log cabin schoolrooms on the frontier, some woman still had to manage the boys who had rather been out riding the horses and shooting the turkeys. So
Yep.
all that to say, the beautiful thing is be there, be present, narrate the masculine journey because it's unique. And by the way, there are very, very good books available on this subject. Read them, know what you're talking about, know the stats. Just the fact that I have said probably 10,000 times to an educator, well, the developmental psychologists tell us that a boy can be as much as 5 years behind a girl of the same age. That little gem that right there planted in their brain, they'll suddenly go, man, that's right. I remember reading something about that back in school. And they're not being silly. I mean, I'm there respecting them and trusting them. And they'll actually change their approach and change their policies and be a little bit more patient and develop programs. But I will tell you that I don't want to put a bow on this. It's not going well for boys in the public schools.
That's
They
right.
are 2 out of 3 students in special needs programs are boys. Boys are behind in reading, behind in math. I could go on forever about this. And we need men to walk with them. We need educators to get up to speed. We need conferences that talk about the masculine educational journey and developmental journey, etc. And we've got to do some stuff in DC, which I'm already part of, but we're going to have to do a lot more. So I appreciate the question. It's complicated, but you've begun the answer, which is having men narrate the masculine journey and be there for that boy and assure him he's just normal and we'll get through this.
That's absolutely right, man. I love that phrase, narrating the masculine journey. So important that we have this community, built around guiding young boys into manhood. And I know that we've talked about that in the past and the importance of rites of passage and ritual, and we've done podcasts on that. And so, men, this stuff is so important. Stephen, thank you so much, man. We did it. We covered all the topics that I
We
wanted.
arrived,
I
baby.
can't believe it.
We arrived.
Woo, man. It was like rapid fire at you there, but I thank you for, walking us through from what's happening right now in the Middle East and the possibility of, a war on American soil to church hurt. Guys, check out that book. Incredible. Don't choose to get offended. Nobody's perfect. Keep in the game. And then all the way to what's going on with young boys and medication. And guys, if you're not getting outdoors, fresh air, physical activity, rough, rambunctious, and rugged with your teenage son, you're messing up. But it's never too late to fix it either, right? So sometimes, not always, but sometimes the answer is as simple as give them an outlet to be the person that God designed them to be. Don't medicate them to be a different person altogether.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Stephen, just can't thank you enough for your time, for your work, for your writing, for your podcast. And once again, it was awesome having you on the show.
Man, I appreciate it so much. Look forward to next time. And you guys keep on rocking, man. You're doing good work.
Awesome. Thank you. Man, what an incredible conversation that was with Stephen Mansfield, one of our absolute favorite podcast guests. And guys, what we talked about today was just so important. I hope that you will click on the show links, check out his books, share this podcast on YouTube. If you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, you got to go do that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, comment, like it. That helps us be able to be found, be discoverable by more men. That's how we can reach more men, and you can help us do it by sharing in YouTube and commenting there. But guys, one of the most important announcements that we've got in Men's Alliance is coming up soon, and that is Start the Fire. April 19th and 20th. I want to explain to you exactly what Start the Fire is. This is designed, it is a weekend experience designed specifically for men that listen to this podcast but do not live near a tribe. If that's you, then we've got an event made just for you, and it's called Start the Fire. If you're listening to this podcast, you want to be more involved in Men's Alliance, you love what we're doing, what we're saying, but you don't live near a tribe, come to Start the Fire. So all you got to do is get yourself to Richmond, Virginia. It's going to be an incredible weekend. I promise you, you will not be sitting indoors listening to a speaker. There will be no coffee in the foyer. There will be no refreshments in the lobby. There will be no, speakers on stage. It is going to be all outdoors. It is going to be extremely tribal, rugged, and real. We did this event last year for the first time, and we radically changed 20 men's lives. This one coming up in April, we've opened it up to 48 men. So get to our website, men'salliancetribe.com, register for Start the Fire. Click on experiences, click on Start the Fire, register April 19th, 20th, Richmond, Virginia. I hope to see you around that fire. Thanks for listening to the Men's Alliance podcast. We hope to see you in one of our tribes or at one of our unforgettable weekend experiences. So join us at men'salliancetribe.com.